So for context, I, 27F, am not the baking type. My idea of homemade dessert is boxed brownie mix with extra chocolate chips tossed in. My best friend Sophie, 28F, though, baking is her entire personality. She's the one who makes sourdough pets, spends hours hand-piping buttercream roses, and casually whips up macarons like it's no big deal. A few months back, Sophie texted me all excited about this local baking competition. She said I had to enter with her. It would be such a fun bonding thing. I laughed because I figured I'd be in way over my head, but she kept pushing. It's not about winning, it's about the experience, she said. Eventually, I gave in, mostly because she's my best friend, and honestly, her excitement was contagious. The competition day finally rolled around. The venue was buzzing. Rows of polished stainless steel counters, the smell of sugar and butter in the air, and way more serious bakers than I expected. I showed up with my little handwritten recipe card and a bag of ingredients, ready to cling to Sophie like a lifeline. But here's the weird part. Sophie, who's usually my partner in crime, barely spoke to me once we got there. She wasn't her usual bubbly self with me at all. Instead, she turned on this charm I'd never really seen before, laughing with the other contestants, complimenting their work, chatting up the judges whenever they passed by. With me, it was more clipped, just quick nods and uh-huhs. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just nervous and focusing. But standing there in my apron, feeling like the newbie, I couldn't shake the tiny sting of how quickly I'd gone from best friend sidekick to background noise. Before we even started baking, Sophie leaned over with this exaggerated smile plastered on her face. She started explaining the rules to me like I was a 5-year-old. "You know we only have 2 hours, right?" she said in this sing-songy voice, waving her hands dramatically. "And don't forget, you have to use at least one local ingredient. Otherwise, you're automatically disqualified." I just stared at her. I had read the rule sheet like everyone else. It wasn't complicated. The way she was talking, slow, syrupy sweet like she was a kindergarten teacher, made my skin crawl a little. This wasn't my best friend hyping me up. It was like she was performing for someone. And then I noticed the looks. A couple of the contestants nearby glanced over, then quickly looked away. One of them actually rolled their eyes when Sophie patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, sweetie, I'll help you if you get stuck." The dirty looks didn't stop there. Every time Sophie talked to me in that faux patient voice, I could feel the room shift. Side glances, whispers, little smirks. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was imagining it, but the tension was real. I couldn't figure out what I had done to deserve being treated like the clueless kid in the room. At that point, I still trusted Sophie. I thought maybe she was just overcompensating for my lack of experience. But there was this gnawing little pit in my stomach I couldn't shake. Like I had walked into the competition already wearing a clown nose, and everyone else had been told the joke before I arrived. Right before the competition kicked off, Sophie turned to me with this bright, conspiratorial grin. "You know what would be so amazing?" she said, her voice all sparkles and sugar. "If we made matching cakes, like yours and mine would be sister cakes. They'd look incomplete alone, but together, a masterpiece." I blinked at her. Honestly, it sounded kind of adorable. I wasn't here to win anyway. I was just here to have fun and survive without burning the place down. And the idea of us presenting 2 cakes that fit together like puzzle pieces, it felt symbolic, you know? Like best friend solidarity baked in buttercream. So I nodded and said yes. She squeezed my arm, and immediately started sketching out ideas in her little notebook. I let her take the lead. She knew what she was doing, and I trusted her. The announcer called time, and suddenly the room snapped into motion. Ovens clicked on, mixers roared to life, and the air filled with the smell of sugar and butter. I tied my apron tighter, smoothed down my recipe card, and tried to steady my nerves. For a moment, despite the nerves and the weird looks, I felt excited. It was me and Sophie, side by side, about to create something together. At least, that's what I thought. Once the clock started, the rules were clear. No peeking at each other's stations. We could talk, but we couldn't cross that invisible line or check in on what the other was doing. It made sense. They didn't want people copying each other mid-bake. So I dug into my side of things. I'd prepped my ingredients, tied my hair back, and tried to remember Sophie's helpful tips she'd rattled off earlier. Stuff like, keep your sponge extra thin so it stacks neatly, and don't overdo the frosting. Minimalism is more elegant. I tried. I really did. But the more I followed her suggestions, the less right it felt. My cake layers looked flimsy, my frosting skimpy, and all I could picture was a sad little stack that screamed, I don't know what I'm doing. So halfway through, I made a decision. Screw it. If I was going down, I'd go down baking something that actually felt like me. I thickened up the layers, leaned into bolder colors, and piped the kind of swirls that would make Pinterest proud. I wanted my half of the sister cake to stand on its own, even if Sophie thought it needed her half to look complete. Around me, the other contestants were deep in their zones. I kept catching quick glances, someone whispering to another, Sophie laughing a little too loudly at something. But I shook it off. I poured every ounce of focus into making my half-pristine determined that when the covers came off, mine wouldn't look like the beginner pity project. And as I smoothed the final layer of frosting, I couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. My cake wasn't just passable. It was actually good. While our cakes baked, the air filled with that buttery sweet smell that usually makes me feel safe and happy. I leaned over the divider and told Sophie how excited I was, how fun it was to do this together, how I couldn't wait to see our sister cakes side by side. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached her eyes. It was tight, almost smug, like she was already savoring some private joke. Yeah, she said, drawing out the word. It's going to be really something. I tried to brush it off as nerves. Maybe she was just focused. When the timers finally went off, we each pulled our cakes from the ovens, set them down to cool, and got to work with frosting and finishing touches. The rule was no peeking until presentation, so I only saw her cake when the staff lifted the screens dividing our stations. My stomach dropped. Her matching cake wasn't designed to complement mine. It was designed to mock it. Where mine was bold, colorful, and a little whimsical, hers was sleek, monochromatic, sharp-edged perfection. My swirls suddenly looked cartoonish next to her razor-clean lines. And the kicker, she had decorated her side in a way that made mine look incomplete. Like mine was the before, and hers was the after. I caught the flicker of shock on her face when she saw that my cake had actually turned out pretty damn good. Not professional level, sure, but far from the disaster she was clearly banking on. Still, hers was undeniably superior, the kind of cake you see on glossy bakery ads. I tried to play nice. I forced a smile and said, "Wow, yours looks incredible. I'm glad mine doesn't drag us both down too much." She tilted her head, lips curling into that sweet, poisonous grin. No, it's cute," she said. "You did so well for your first competition. It's just such a shame only one of us can win." Her words stuck in my throat like a dry crumb. And then the announcer called for judging to begin. As the judges started their slow circuit around the room, forks in hand and notepads ready, the buzz of gossip picked up like static. Competitors whispered to each other in little huddles, and for the first time, I realized a lot of that whispering was about me. I caught fragments as they floated over the clatter of dishes. She told me she's a professional. No, Sophie said she's never baked before, just wanted to give it a shot. Then why enter a competition this serious? The contradictions were dizzying. Half of them thought I was some secret pro here to show off. The other half thought I was a clueless amateur dragged in as a side act. Either way, the stories didn't add up, and I had no idea how my name had gotten tangled in them. Then one of the contestants, a woman piping delicate roses onto her cupcakes, turned to me with narrowed eyes. "So which is it? You a pro or not?" she asked, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Because honestly, if you are, it's kind of embarrassing that your cake looks like that next to Sophie's." Her tone wasn't cruel so much as cutting, like she was holding up a mirror to some fraud. My cheeks burned hot. I stammered out, "I'm not a professional. I'm not even close." Sophie invited me to do this with her. I just like baking at home. I could tell by their faces they didn't buy it. Some smirked, others shook their heads like I'd just told the world's worst lie. The gossip web was sticky, and I was caught in the middle of it. Before I could explain further, it was time for my cake to be judged. The judges leaned in, murmuring to each other as they circled our sister cakes. One of them smiled and said, "Now this is clever. 2 cakes that complement each other. Very creative." They started with Sophie's. I watched as their forks cut perfect, even slices through her razor-sharp layers. "Beautifully uniform," one judge said, nodding. Another chimed in, "This looks like it belongs in a showcase window." Sophie's face lit up, her chin tilting higher as if she'd already won. Then they turned to mine. I braced myself. My piping swirls weren't symmetrical, my colors a little loud, and compared to Sophie's sleek artistry, mine looked playful at best. The judges cut into it anyway, tasting with the same seriousness they gave hers. And then, smiles. Real ones. "This one looks less polished," one judge said, "but the flavors are spot on. The texture's moist, the frosting balanced, comforting, in the best way." Another judge added, "Honestly, this tastes better. If we're judging the cakes as a set, this is the heart." I blinked. Wait, what? When they announced the winner, I almost didn't process it. My name. I had won. The trophy, the cash prize, it was mine. Sophie's smile cracked like sugar glass, and the look in her eyes could have curdled cream. They asked me to say a few words, so I just told the truth. I mostly bake at home. I'm not a professional. I just trusted my gut on what would taste good. I even smiled at Sophie and added, "Honestly, I wouldn't have even known where to start without Sophie. She's the one who taught me the fundamentals." There it was. Her face froze, half smile, half seethe. Because in that moment, she couldn't even argue with me. My humility and honesty had won me the competition, the judges, and the crowd. And Sophie? She was left with her perfect polished cake and no trophy. After the ceremony wrapped up, I was buzzing, half in disbelief that I'd actually won, half trying not to look directly at Sophie, who hovered like a thundercloud. The other contestants came up to congratulate me, though I noticed a shift in their tone compared to earlier. They were warmer now, a little embarrassed maybe, as if realizing I wasn't the fraud Sophie had painted me to be. Bits of conversation leaked out. One baker admitted Sophie had told people I was a professional baker entering to pad my resume. Another said she'd also claimed I was a clueless beginner. She was mentoring for fun. Which, of course, explained the dirty looks and the gossip. It depended on which story Sophie had fed them. But the thing about lies? They never line up cleanly once they hit daylight. The contradictions made Sophie look less like a victim and more like a manipulator. Meanwhile, I stood there holding my ridiculous oversized check and trophy, thanking people, laughing nervously, just being myself. And the contrast between my humility and Sophie's simmering fury couldn't have been louder. She didn't congratulate me, not even a fake smile for the crowd. Instead, she packed up in silence and left early, heels clacking like gunshots across the floor. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. Because in the end, my win wasn't just about butter, sugar, and eggs. It was about honesty cutting sharper than any fondant knife. Sophie had tried to build her reputation by tearing mine down, but her own web of lies collapsed the moment the truth tasted better. Walking out with that trophy tucked under my arm, I realized I hadn't just beaten her cake. I'd beaten her game.